Hi, and welcome to Faculty Focus, a podcast supporting the clinical education community in Leicester. We bring you Educator CPD, showcase new initiatives, and shine a light on some of the faculty behind it all. Hello, everybody, to this episode of the Faculty Focus podcast. And today we're going to be talking about LEDs. No, not the little lights, but actually locally employed doctors, specifically those that are employed here at UHL. And to help me talk about LEDs at UHL, I've got a colleague of mine joining me. Aleem, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, and thanks to Andy for having me on the podcast. My name is Aleem Ahmed. I'm an infectious disease and general medicine consultant, and I'm also a clinical tutor based in the Clinical Education Centre in University Hospitals of Leicester, primarily who is responsible for looking after the education needs of our locally employed doctors / Clinical Fellowship Programme doctors.
Indeed. Well, it actually leads us straight into that first question, which I've been burning to ask, and that is all the different names that this group of doctors seems to be called in different directorates and different parts of the hospital. So, I mean, just off the top of my head, we've got, of course, the LED doctors now, and you mentioned clinical fellows, but we've had trust grades, staff grades, clinical fellows, specialty doctors. I think in ITAPs we tend to call them specialty doctors. I mean, pretty much all the same, or are there sort of differences between all of those?
Yeah, let me just start with some of the backstory of this. UHL, we're a huge organization. And I remember a few years ago, I tried to work out with some HR colleagues how many trust grade doctors encompassing all of these that we have. And no one could give me an answer because of all the many names every department has for them. Two people doing the same job in the same department could be totally different names, and it makes it really difficult to work out where everyone is, what grade they're at, what support they need. And it probably doesn't also help as well in terms of just for the actual doctors themselves to be in such varied titles that make it difficult to ascertain who they are and what stage of training they're at. So we are trying to streamline it. With Clinical Fellowship Programme has launched last year now, and it's very much in its second year. And they are locally employed doctors. They're not in national training programs. They still are doctors in training. They still have training needs, and that's important to recognise. And I think that's an important part of this standardising the name process is to recognise that these doctors have training needs. And we're moving to try and get clinical fellowship program doctors, senior clinical fellows, and advanced clinical fellows. There will still be SES doctors, confusingly, specialty doctors who are different in their own right, the associate specialists, but really for traditionally the LED doctor role that operates independent of SES doctors. We're trying to standardise it and get the naming right so we can, as part of the package of everything that we're trying to do to improve their working lives and make it more easier to understand who they are and what needs they have.
Yeah, I think that's right. People can be clinical fellows and they could be, someone who's stepped out of a program at ST6, for example, who's followed the traditional training program for several years, or it could be someone who's, just finished their medical training in a foreign country, who's just come over as their first job in the UK, and they could be, working at an F2 sort of level. And there's absolutely no way of knowing on a rota when you see the name as, unlike those in a training program, you have a ST or a CT and a number, gives you some idea of where you might expect that person to be working at. So yeah, I think that's really helpful just to be able to distinguish even between the grades of whatever title they have is, are they a junior or a senior, for want of a better word, a junior, because I think we're trying to sort of get rid of those sorts of terms, aren't we, and undermining our doctors. Great. Okay. Well, so we're basically just, sounds like we're trying to consolidate and use the same titles so everyone knows who they are. Just coming back to yourself then, how come you've ended up in this role? Like, what's the background to your role and perhaps some of the other roles in the trust that are here to support the LED doctors? So how did you get into the role?
I've always been involved in teaching, and I think it was after my absolutely deeply traumatic FY1 when I finished it and thought, you know what, I would like to give something back and give my tips out to future F1s when I was an F2. And I started some educational initiatives around then, and it kind of snowballed. Each year I did a bit more, I got more experience, completed my master's in medical education along the way. So I've learned how to be a teacher, and I also enjoy giving back. I enjoy the process of the fact that it makes you a better doctor as you teach more. And also, on another side of things, many people ask me this, but I'm actually not an IMG. I'm not an international medical graduate. I trained at St Andrews in Manchester, but not that I refer myself as it, but I am a ethnic minority doctor. I'm a BAME doctor. I'm both Scottish and Indian. And that has shaped me, in the NHS. And I remember in Glasgow encountering a lot of discrimination and difficulties with myself and with colleagues for many reasons. And that's always given me an interest in just evening out the playing field, really making sure others are supported. And that, I guess, when I moved to Leicester in 2015, I saw this. We've got a lot of IMG doctors working in a lot of roles here. And actually, at that time, there wasn't a huge amount offered. Working with them, particularly in my microbiology job, where I would get dozens of phone calls each day, often from IMG trust grade doctors. And I would realize actually that the training opportunities are not equal for them and for others. And I realized that they are a particularly vulnerable group of doctors. And that kind of kicked me off to my clinical teaching fellow job, which I did many years ago now within UHL, within the Clinical Education Centre. And before I did that job, I remember even during my interview, I was interested in trust grades and developing teaching initiatives for this huge group that has been increasing every year of quite vulnerable doctors who had very little teaching and protected teaching initiatives on offer. And things have just snowballed on year. The more I've done, the more I've enjoyed, the more I've learned. And I've done that as part of a big team. Within every member of the postgraduate CEC at this point has helped me, teaches with me, and I wouldn't have been able to do what I do today without all their help. Really rewarding now that our numbers have gone up at one point to 500 trust grade doctors to be able to offer educational resources and initiatives to such a big group of our workforce now as part of a team which I am at.
I mean, I certainly remember when I stepped out of my registrar years as a education fellow, the DME at the time, Professor Sukar, I don't know if she was starting at that point, but certainly that was one of the things that I was sort of signposted towards is we have this group of doctors, they're going to grow in number and we need some sort of support program. And whilst there were the sort of beginnings of, courses and, college delivered orientation things for IMGs coming to work in the UK, there was nothing solid that we had locally. So it sounds like, it's best part of a decade now that we've been sort of working on this front of trying to provide some training, some induction, orientation to this group of doctors, which, like as you say, have very, very individualized needs compared to UK graduates. So I can see, certainly as you described, sort of seeing this starting to develop and growing over the last few years, which I suspect a lot of trusts are probably realizing this as well. And I'd like to think that Leicester, given our population and the numbers of SDs or LEDs that we have here, is sort of perhaps slightly ahead of the curve, or at least up there in terms of being at the front of the pack of developing this sort of support structure. So who else do you have working alongside you? I know a lot of CMGs will be looking to appoint people to roles to support these individuals. Do you have a group of people you work with or other people in similar roles?
Yeah, so over the years, we've built up a little faculty of people. I would start by saying within the educational centre, Joanne Kirtley and Prof. Carr, who you mentioned was my supervisor earlier on, who gave me a lot of support, and now Mark McCarthy, who support me through everything I do. Our new educational admin, Mohammed Jassat, has been excellent, has really helped us take things on a level within the education team. Faculty of people who give up their spare time to give teaching on our protected teaching, on our courses, which quite a lot of which were out of hours for many years. We developed a little core of really motivated teachers who make the program that we give. And along with that, the trust grades themselves as well, who give us ideas, who give us feedback. We've got this trust champion role, CFP champions, when we give them leadership roles to encourage them to participate within our teaching program. Within the Clinical Fellowship Programme, there's the Clinical Fellowship Programme team, Tarek, Olivia, Alfie, and Dr. Vasu, who supervises them. So yeah, we all work together. I'm certainly not doing this on my own. And that's the strength of what we do, really. It's the strength of the team all giving ideas and working on providing education and support initiatives to this massive group of doctors where there is a lot of work to do.
Yeah, we've certainly got a couple of CSER leads in ITAPs, I know, just to help people because that's one of the commonest questions that people have when they arrive is that can I work towards a CSER even because I'm not on a training scheme? There is still a pathway there. So I know we have those in ITAPs, but I suspect other CMGs probably have similar. Are there any parts of the hospital that tend to see a bigger group of LEDs or clinical fellows than others?
Yeah, well, firstly, at this stage, because they make up so much of our workforce, there aren't many areas which don't have CFP doctors in them right now. The biggest groups, though, are within medicine, and that includes cardiology and resp in the Glenfield, within kind of the general medicine, acute medicine, ESM, CMG specialties within the Royal ED. They've always made up a significant workforce, and in orthopedics in particular, across the general and the Royal. Those groups probably make up the majority of our workforce, but certainly, yeah, right now they're in pretty much every department at this stage.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what are some of the what are the sort of challenges then? You've mentioned a few, but what are sort of challenges that this cohort of doctors seem to have, common themes across the CMGs with this group of doctors? Is there specific areas that you're sort of looking to target as a priority?
Yeah, so I mean, firstly, with our IMGs, they are probably more diverse compared to any other group of doctors we have in terms of their backgrounds, their experience, their training needs. And that's been quite important to recognize as part of the teaching program we've developed. A significant number of these doctors are brand new to not just the UK, not just the NHS, but working in a medical ward often, and then encountering challenges, often moving their family to a new environment, to a new country, often looking for houses and doing all the life stuff that we all know to do because they've been in the UK for so long, but they're learning as they go along the way. So that new to the UK approach, then there's new to the NHS. What does IMT mean? What does CST mean? What are these exams and when do we do it? What is study leave and how do we claim it? Even the induction process, because they often start out of sync. They don't necessarily get the same robust August or December corporate induction and local shadowing, tailored induction that doctors in formal training programs get. And often they are more vulnerable. I will say a lot of people, all doctors I work with have you know, great English, you'll work here and certainly more than acceptable enough to work. But often they are worried. One of the more common things, having just an interview day, people are worried about, oh, English is my second language. I don't quite get the lingo. I'm not sure. And often a big part of it is a confidence thing about being given a little bit of comm skills training to learn about, this is S bar, this is spikes, this is how we break bad news. So yeah, there are lots of different angles to it, but they are a particularly vulnerable group of doctors, and they're particularly exposed because the truth is they are out with formal UK training programs which have a lot of built-in protections and funding for training, and we've had to kind of plug the gaps, and we focus on education, we focus on their well-being, we focus on career planning, but we also focus on just being there for them, to signpost them to whatever need or just to listen to them. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's an increasing realization that, educational supervision is something that they need on an individual level. They need senior consultants in the trust to be able to sort of signpost different areas for development, or where to get certain clinical competencies, for example. Increasingly, there's more pressure on the trust providing that educational supervisor for these individuals. There is a number of different induction programs for those entering the UK, and that can be developed at a college level. So I know at the Royal College of Anaesthetists, for example, they have a sort of a fairly regular program course where they get people on and do some orientation there. But I think you're right. I just think back to my inductions, and they weren't perfect by any means, but of course I had the advantage of being in the system for 5 years undergraduate to sort of at least get used to the lingo. So I can only imagine just how difficult it can be if you've literally just touched down and you're living in temporary accommodation and you have to sort of figure everything else out. So a huge amount of work. Do you have other sort of ways of other departments in the hospital that can help with things like you mentioned, maybe some of the more life, setting yourself up in Leicester? Because of course, if someone came to me and said, "Oh, where do I go to rent housing or find a community or the foods that I like or whatever," I would have no idea where to start. So do you have sort of contacts in different areas like this to signpost them to?
Yeah, well, firstly, it's important to recognise that some areas within UHL have excellent programs around this. Within medicine, particularly recently with Dr. Latif, who's done a lot for the induction experience within medicine, within ED, who've always done a huge amount for their large group of doctors. There's been lots of good initiatives to facilitate integration of doctors to the UK and to the NHS. This topic is something that actually we try and focus on to a degree within our protected teaching. We do clinical, but actually the bigger, more important parts that we do are the well-being, the integration into the UK, integration into Leicester. It is the how do you open a bank account talk. Like we're giving that one this Thursday. It's the how to buy a house, how to buy a car, how to get your driving license. We try and cover these topics. Often it's me because it's hard to get people to do these specific topics, but we have got others. We've got Dr. Dale's one of the endocrinologists who gave a really great talk about, less than full time. What does it mean? How to do it? What are the implications for you? And it's these topics that, they're not going to get covered in any other way. And we've recorded these, we've built a bit of a database on our Padlet, and we've also included these within our induction handbooks that we offer to people as well when they start.
Yeah, and I think, yes, you mentioned the Padlet there, and you sent a link to me before this recording. So it's something that I guess people can email you and ask for access to that Padlet if they're an LED doctor who needs that support. So we'll stick your email in the show notes so that people can be in touch and you can provide that sort of resource, which looked fairly substantial, I have to say. So you've done an incredible piece of work there. We've talked a lot about the kind of support that these doctors need, but are there sorts of advantages for the trust, other than obviously having people on the ground and rotas filled and shifts being covered? Are there any sorts of advantages that you can see the trust gets from employing what is now a fairly substantial cohort of doctors?
Yeah, so I think the numbers have more than doubled in the last 3, 4 years while I've really been getting into this job. While we've been monitoring it, we've realized the numbers have increased every year and they make up such a big part of our workforce now. I think the trust has come round to putting greater emphasis on recognizing their training needs are there, how much this affects patient care, how much this affects morale of this huge aspect of our workforce, and also just simply about retention. Typical path is you come, you start at any point in the year, you apply as soon as possible when the training round's open because your friends are applying, you get into what you get into. Often it's I'm applying for medicine because I'm doing medicine and I get into medicine and I go to medicine in any part of the country. And what we're trying to do is just better inform people that they have options and give them reasons to stay within Leicester by supporting them and treating them well, but also give them the opportunity to do that, particularly within the CFP, and also fleshing out within the CSER programme and other roles for them to advance to if they are here for more than a couple of years. So, I mean, they make up such a huge part of our workforce. There's so many benefits, and which all lead to basically just better patient care if we look after these doctors better.
Yeah, I think the idea of your healthcare population actually reflecting your local population is really valuable, isn't it? I mean, the number of times where I've had to call on someone who maybe can speak a particular language or give a bit of an insight into how family dynamics with a patient might be working, or any sort of religious aspects to some of the care that we deliver is invaluable. Sort of very helpful in not saying the wrong thing and making sure you sort of meet the needs of those patients as best you can. So I think that, it just gives everyone a little bit more insight into our local population because of the similarities that these doctors have with them. The other thing that's always struck me is that the enthusiasm that comes from these individuals, when they've benefited from a particular thing in the trust, or they've seen a gap in maybe a learning need within a CMG, they're often the first ones to put their hand up and go, look, I can do some teaching, or maybe we can work something up, and would you know how I'd go about fixing this or making this better? They definitely bring a level of energy that is noticeable, compared to other groups that I work with. So I definitely see those benefits with this cohort and employing them in the numbers that we do. If you do have stuff to offer, or if you want to help out in the support that's being given to these doctors, how would listeners get involved? How would they come and help you out or other members of the team?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking for speakers for our protected teaching, particularly on these other well-being topics that are often ending up with me because can't convince my ID consultant colleagues to give talks on how to open bank accounts. Topics that you think would be useful for international medical graduates simply are always welcome if you're motivated and have the passion for doing that. So we're twice monthly now teaching sessions. We're always looking for speakers. I think it's important to just simply get to know your CFP, LED, trust grade doctor, whatever title they are, whatever title you know them as, and check how they are, particularly when they're new to the UK. Answer their questions, and particularly if they're settling into the UK, often they do just want local advice of where things are, and you can't underestimate within the NHS the power of just saying, how are you? Are you okay? asking about their day, asking how they are, because particularly I remember during COVID, people really, really struggled, particularly in the IMG community who are moving here on their own without knowing anyone, without being able to travel. So please look up for your own LED trust grade CFP doctors in your department, first of all, and signpost them to the initiatives we're doing. Simply show them the Padlet page, give them my email, forward it on, get them on our trust grade WhatsApp group where we share everything. That is always really, really, really helpful. And beyond that, our protected teaching is now twice a month. It's protected teaching. We've been to great lengths to the trust board to discuss with all CMG leads to get this time approved. Please facilitate and allow your CFP doctors to be released just for that. It's just 90 minutes, twice a month. It's such a big initiative and it's such an important one to get everyone in one place to learn the useful topics we're teaching them and also to network and be valued. Can't underestimate the effect that has of, feeling that their training is being recognized and they are important as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
all
Yeah,
those things
that's
really.
great. So they can contact yourself. Do you have a JDA? Did you mention them earlier on?
Yeah, Mohammed Jassat is the clinical education lead. He's our education coordinator for trust grade CFP doctors. I can pop his email to you as well, but we've got our trust grade mailbox, which general inquiries can be addressed to.
I'll stick those in the show notes as well. Brilliant. Yeah, and you've mentioned the Padlet as well, and the regular evening meetings too. So I think I've got me along to one in a few weeks' time. I've got to talk about something education.
Yeah, they were evening seminars. Now we've moved them to in hours, so they're just 3 till 4:30. We may do some evening ones ad hoc in the future, more for social and have themed events. But for now, our emphasis is the protected in hours teaching sessions that we're really trying to push.
Great, lovely. And sort of future directions, is it really just establishing what you have at the moment, getting it sort of consolidated, if you like, or are there ideas for the future in terms of where you'd like to expand and work on?
Yeah, we've always got some projects cooking, and we definitely want to consolidate and make sure this protected teaching goes as well as it should do. And it does need to be cultivated, and we need to get attendance up as high as we can. And for my part, ensure that the speakers are of high quality as they can be with the most relevant topics. I think we've got induction right. We've got meetings before they start, when they start, a few weeks after they start in a small group, and then a bigger enhanced induction. But we're always trying to improve that. We've developed some source material, some handbooks around that, and we're always trying to add to our Padlet to make sure there's as much relevant material on there as possible, including our recorded talks. Beyond that, we've got a project on exception reporting to try and encourage our doctors to exception report more, making that easier and providing some education around that. We're trying to get more courses for them. We've just ran a mock interview in communication skills course last weekend, which went really well. Yeah, we've got more ideas in the pipeline, but we are trying to make sure we continue to do what we do well, but we want to offer as much as possible for our massive group of doctors.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think you're doing an excellent job yourself and everyone that you're working with, Aleem. It's certainly grown, as I say, over the last decade or so. It's grown into something that I feel now is much better known. Hopefully, our listeners now have a better idea of the support that's available for these individuals, and it's not just those supervising them in their CMGs alone. There is, as you say, there's a whole clinical fellowship program, evening events, networking, support, induction. It really has grown into something massive. So hopefully our listeners can spread the word and signpost to anyone who needs to access that to either yourself or just a JDA. Was there anything else you wanted to add? Just something that I haven't asked that you think is really important to get out there, or do you think we've covered everything we need
No,
to?
I think we've covered everything. Yeah, just encourage anyone who is an LED trust grade CFP or even just an IMG, an International Medical Graduate in UHL, to make sure you're on our WhatsApp group and check out our Padlet page and come to our events. We would love to meet you.
Great. Lovely. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Aleem. I know you've got to head off to another Trust Grade meeting as it happens, or LED meeting, so I won't keep you any longer. But thank you very much for joining us, and we may get you on in the future just to give us an update on where things are and any new developments with the LED support that you provide. So thank you very much, and yeah, we'll see you soon.
Great. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Faculty Focus podcast. If you like the episode, please share with friends and colleagues. You can also like and subscribe to the show and perhaps even leave a review. Clinical education can be tough, but we're stronger as a community. So if you have an idea for an episode or would like to come on and talk to us, do get in touch via email or Twitter. Details in the show notes. The Faculty Focused Podcast, Community Development Showcase.